Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in this video, we are seeing the React.js interview question answers which were asked in Capgemini. So all the question answers which we are discussing in this video are based upon the real interview experience shared by the candidate. So let's start the video. First question which was asked in the interview was what is difference between block and inline element. So let's see how you can answer this question in interview. So to answer this question, you can mention, for example, at least 4 or 5 differences between block element and the inline element. So let's see the differences. So the first difference is block elements, they take the full width of the container. So let us suppose that this is your parent container and inside this you are having one element which is a block element. So this block element, even if it requires only this much width, it requires only 20 pixel or whatever pixels is, it is going to take the entire full width of your container. It will not let any other element to sit in this horizontal space. So block elements, they occupy the full width of the container, whereas the inline element, they take only the required width. So if this is your element and it is an inline element, then it is going to take only the width which is required for that specific element, and it doesn't care about the rest of the horizontal space. So it is only going to occupy the width which is required for that specific element. So the second difference is block element, they start in the new line. So after this block element, if there is another block element, it is going to start in the new line, because block element, they do not let any other element to occupy the any position in that horizontal space. So block element, they start in the new line, whereas inline element, if there is a space left over somewhere in the horizontal space of the previous element also, they occupy that position, so they do not start in the new line. Okay, then the third difference is we can set the height and width of the block element. So if this is your block element, then you can set the width and you can set the height of this element. Coming to inline element, you cannot set the height and width of the inline element by default. So but in case you want to set the height and width of the inline element, then you'll have to make use of the property for inline block. So if you're making use of that property, then you can set the height and width of the inline element. Yeah, so this is the property, that is display inline block, and this is going to combine the characteristics of both inline and block element, and this lets you set the height and width of inline element, but by default you cannot do it. So as a difference, you can say that for block element we can set their height and width, whereas for inline element by default we cannot set their height and width. And examples for block element include div, p, that is paragraph, and h1, that is heading tag. So these are block elements. And for inline elements, examples include span, a, that is anchor tag, and then the strong tag. So these are the differences between block and inline element. Now let's see the next question. Second question asked in the interview was what is the purpose of alt attribute in image tag and why is it important for web accessibility. So in case you have made use of the image tag, then you would have seen that in image tag we have one attribute called source. So source will have the path of your image from where you want to load that image. Also alongside your source attribute, you have one more attribute called alt. So alt is nothing but alternate. So in case your image, so source is not able to load, or you have given some wrong path, or there is some issue, some network issue, and the source whatever you have given, that image is not being loaded in your website, then in that case we show the alt. So in case you have some image and because of some issue this image did not load in your website, so instead of this image you will have a text called as company logo. So that is why this alt is used. So this is alternative text. So in case you don't have any image, you were not able to load the image, then at least show the alternative text to the viewer so that he is able to understand that what was the intent of this image. Okay, now let's see what is the answer written. The alt attribute, it provides the alternative text if image can't be displayed. Okay, so in case the image did not load, or there was some problem, or you have given the path wrong, or some network issue, then we can show the alternative text. That is why alt attribute is useful, and it is used by the screen readers, helping visually impaired users understand the image. So for accessibility purpose, accessibility is nothing but it is a kind of feature which we provide in our web application for the people who are having disability. So disability can also include people who have visual impairment. So for those people we have something called a screen reader. So these are the tools, they are going to read out the entire screen, the entire application for visually impaired users. So in case they are not able to see your application properly, screen readers would read out that what this image means. So if you just have your image, then screen readers would not be able to convey the meaning of that image to the user, right? So for that reason, if you write your alternate tag here, alternate attribute, then screen reader would read out that this is an image and it is a company logo. So for that reason, alt attribute, it is important for web accessibility. And also it improves the SEO, that is search engine optimization of your application, as search engines, they read the alt text. So search engine, there are few crawlers in our search engines which are going to rank your application. Okay, so you will get the ranking of your application, and accordingly your application will rank better and it would appear in the top results of the browser search. So for those web crawlers, they might not be able to see the image, because image will get loaded later on, right? Whenever you're trying to fetch application, images are heavy resources, so they might get fetched later on. So because of that, if there is no alternate text, then search engines might think that there is no content related to, for example, if your website is related to some shopping, okay, shopping website, so if you don't have any alt tag, then web crawlers might not even know that your website is also for shopping, it is a e-commerce website, right? So if you have something like alternate text, so even if the image did not load, web crawlers are going to read from your code itself that this website is having some content related to whatever user is searching. So for that reason, these alt attributes are important, that is for your search engine optimization, and search engines, they read the alt text. This is how you can answer this question, that what is the purpose of alt attribute in image tag and why it is important for web accessibility. Now let's see the third question which was asked in the interview was, what is the difference between div and section element in HTML? So let's see the difference. Div, it is a generic container for grouping the content with no semantic meaning. So this is a generic container and it does not convey any meaning to the developer or to the browser. So it is just that it is used to group the content and there can be no meaning, there is no meaning given to it. Whereas coming to section, they are semantic tags and they group the related content. With div, it is not necessary that you have to group the related content only, you can just generic, like generally you can group the elements. Whereas with section, you have to group the related content, also semantic tag, they are uh, also the section, they are semantic tag, section comes under semantic tag, and section provides us a semantic meaning that whatever is the group which you see, they are having some similar content. So this is the difference between div and section. For example, we can have chapter, we can have footer section. So other examples for the semantic tags are this. So difference between div and section, you can say div, it is a generic container, whereas section, it is a semantic tag which is useful for grouping the related content. And third point is, use the section when content has a common theme, that is they have some common information. For example, if you see newspaper, in newspaper you have different sections, right? You have international news section, you have national news section, then there is sports section, then there is entertainment section. So all of them are separately in separate pages because they have some common theme, that this all the news is related to sports or this news is related to entertainment. So that is how sections are useful. So sections, they are useful for grouping the content. They have common theme, they should be having a common theme, or they should have a similar meaning. So this is about the difference between div and section element. Let's see the fourth question. Fourth question which was asked in the interview was, what is CSS box model and explain the different components. So CSS box model, it is a fundamental concept in CSS that describes how the elements are rendered on the web page. So if you have any element, like there might be some thousands or lakhs of element in your web page, right? So for each and every element, the box model, it is going to describe how it is rendered and what are their dimension, what is the spacing, how it is calculated. So all these things are done by using the box model, and it treats every HTML elements like a rectangular box. And rectangular box, it is having the four layers. So four layers, first what is there is your content. So let us suppose this is a div and it is having some content or it is having some image. So the first part is our content, so it can have some text here, okay. Then we have a border, so this is the border, and then between border and the content, the space which is left is your padding, and then the space outside the border is your margin. This is margin and this is your border. and this is your content. So this content, what you see, it is the innermost part. As we can see, this is the innermost part of our rectangular box where the actual content of the element resides, and it can be text, it can be image, or it can be video, and its dimension are defined by its height and width. So this is the height, and this horizontal thing is the width. And then we have padding, that is the space between border and the content, that is called as padding. So this is a transparent space which surrounds our content area, and it separates it from the border, and it's controlled by the css property called as padding. We can individually give it like padding left, padding right, padding top, and padding bottom, or we can give it together by just making use of padding property in css, and it adds the space inside the element. Then we have is border. So border, it is a line which surrounds the padding and the content, providing a visual boundary for the element. So you can see that this border, whatever you see, it is a line which is surrounding the content and the padding, and it provides the visual boundary for the element. And it can have appearance like the thickness. We can decide the thickness of this border, then we can give the style, and then the color, and it is controlled by css property called border. Then we have last one of our rectangular box, that is our margin. So this is also a transparent space which surrounds the border and separates the element from the other element on the page, and it's controlled by the css property called margin property, and it adds the space outside the element. So these are the different properties of our box model, and this is how you can explain the different component. Now let's see the fifth question, that is what is flexbox in css and center an element both horizontally and vertically. So what is flexbox, it is a layout model that allows item to be aligned and distributed easily. So this is a layout model which is available in css, and it makes our task easier. If you have a huge container and then you have multiple item or even a one item, so it makes our code easier, it makes our task easier, and we have to write very less code to decide how we have to align and distribute. So if we give just few of the properties which are already there, then we can easily align and distribute the items in our container. And how we can center the element horizontally and vertically both, so for that you have to write display flex, and you can give justify content center. So justify content, it is applicable horizontally on, it is applicable on the horizontal x-axis. Then we have align item which is applicable for the y-axis, that is vertical. So from horizontal also you are writing it as center, and from vertically also you are writing it as center, and this is the height of your container, that is 100 vh. So this is how you can make your element uh, to be in center horizontally and vertically. Now let's see the sixth question. Sixth question is what are pseudo classes and pseudo elements in the css. So pseudo classes, they define the special state of the element. So what are the different states of the element? So different states of the elements can be hover, right? If we are hovering on some element, that is a special state of the element. Then we have focus. So if you have any input box, then whenever you're clicking inside this input box, then you are focusing on that element, right? So there is focus also, which is a special state. Then we have nth child, then we have checked. So if you have checkbox, then whether you have checked it or you have unchecked it, that is also one of the special state of the element. So checked is one of the special state. Then you have disabled. So if you have any button or if you have any other element, input element, and you have disabled it, so disabling it, that is in grayed out, that is also one of the special state of the element. So these are few example of the special state of the element, that is hover, focus, and child checked, and then disabled. So these are the different states of the element. And how do we give the css for pseudo classes? So we have to write button, and on hover of this button, so you have to write the syntax, and then you have to write that whatever is the special state, it can be hover, focus, checked, disabled, or whatever. So you can write the special state, and then you can give the css properties like background color should be blue or black or whatever. So this is how you give the css for pseudo classes. Now let's see what are pseudo elements. They style a part of the element. So part of the element can be, for example, this is my paragraph. Okay, here I have written some paragraph. Then it can have different part. It can have before of the element, then it can have after, and if there are multiple paragraph, then we can have the first letter. In this, if I have written s, then it can have the first letter, it can have the first line, of our div or of our paragraph. And if you have the input text, then we have placeholders also, right, that enter your text. So this placeholder is also one of the part of the element. So these are the different parts of the element, and this is called as pseudo elements. So pseudo elements, they are useful for styling the part of an element. And how do we write the css for that? So we are writing a element first, that it is a paragraph element. Then we have to make use of this symbol. Then we have to write whatever is the part of the element. It can be anything like before, after, first letter, first line, placeholder, or anything. So here we have written that for the paragraph element, first line of paragraph, they will be having their font weight as bold. So this is how you can make use of pseudo classes and pseudo element for giving styling for any element for their special state or for special part of that element. Now let's see the seventh question. Seventh question which was asked in the interview was, what is the difference between position relative and position absolute? So let's see the difference. So position relative, they are positioned relative to its normal position. So if this is your element and you have given its position as relative, and if you give, after that, if you're trying to give top as 10 pixel and left as 10 pixel, then it would shift a little bit here. So you can see from left it got some 10 pixels, and from top it got 10 pixels. So you can see that the positioning of this element is relative to its normal position. So this was its normal position, right? So we have shifted it a bit when compared to its normal position. Whereas for absolute positioning, it is positioned relative to its nearest positioned ancestor. So you can we will see an example. If we have this element and we are giving it as a position property as absolute, so it is going to check for any nearest positioned ancestor. So let us suppose this is one of the ancestor which is having position as relative. Then this absolute, if we give anything like top 0 and from left 50%, so it is going to come and position itself here, because it is going to position itself based upon the nearest positioned ancestor. So your element will come and get positioned at this place, because we gave top as 0 pixels and left as 50 pixels, 50%. So this is where your element will come and get settled. So this is the difference between relative and the absolute positioning. Let's see how you can write the code. So you here you have made use of the class name, then you are writing position as relative, and then you can give anything like top and left. So if you want from top 10 pixels and from left 10 pixels, so that you can mention here. Then normally this is for absolute. So for absolute we should have its parent as relative, right? So we have child and then there is a parent. So we have for child we have given position as absolute, and then we are writing top 20 pixel, left 20 pixel. So it is going to be relative to its parent. So in this case, if this is your child and this is your parent, so parent is relative and child is absolute. So in this case, you have given top 20 pixels, so somewhere from here, and left 10 pixels, so somewhere from here. So your element is going to get positioned here according to whatever code we have written. So this is how you can explain the difference between relative and absolute positioning. Now let's see the eighth question. Eighth question which was asked in the interview was, what is difference between null and undefined in JavaScript? So you can mention that undefined, it gets automatically assigned by JavaScript. So if you have declared any variable and you have not given value yet, then the automatic value which is given to that variable by JavaScript is undefined, whereas null, it is explicitly assigned by developer. So this is an intentional value you are giving to your variable, that it is going to save null, it is not going to save anything. So this is a intentional value, whereas undefined, it is a value which is automatically assigned by JavaScript. Then second difference is undefined, it means variable is declared but it is not set. This is what we saw in above difference also, that we have just declared the variable but we have not set any value, whereas with null it means that variable is intentionally empty. And code example, you can see we have just declared a variable a, we did not give it any value. Then we have one more variable let b, and we have intentionally assigned the value as null. Then when you write console.log of a, since it was just declared and not set any value, so JavaScript is going to automatically assign undefined as the value to this variable. Whereas if you write console.log of b, it is going to give you value as null, because this is what you intentionally assign this value. So you are explicitly assigning this value, that it is going to be empty, it is not going to store anything. So null is console. Now let's see the ninth question. What is closure in JavaScript? So let's see what is closure. Closure, it is a function that remembers the variable from its outer scope even after the outer scope has finished executing. Now we will understand this definition by reading the code first, and then we will understand the definition. So let us see what we are doing. We have one function called as outer, and what is this outer function doing? It is just declaring and initializing a variable, and it is returning. So this is what is the work of outdoors. So it has just initial declared and initialized a variable, and it returned as a function. It is not doing any calculation or anything. It didn't do anything. It just returned a function. So you are calling this outer function, and then the outer function returned you a function that is inner. So whatever this variable counter is there, right, it is referencing to this function, because this is what is returned from outer, right? So you called outer, it declared and initialized a variable count, and then it returned you a function. So that function you have got in this counter. Now you can see that outer function has finished. So this part of our definition is clear till now, that outer function has finished executing. Now we are calling the inner function. So this counter is basically this function, right? So you're calling the inner function. How do we call the inner any function? We make use of this parenthesis. So you're calling the inner function, and now inner function gets executed for first time, and it is having count plus plus. Normally it should give us error, right? Because there is in the scope of this inner function, you can see there is nothing called as count variable. Count variable was there in outer function, and which has finished executing, whereas inner function, it is not having anything called as count, and nor are we getting anything from the argument. So what is this count? We should be getting error, but no, we don't get any error here. Count here, whatever this variable is there, this is going to point to the variable which is declared in the outer function. That is what this definition means, that closure is a function that remembers the variable from its outer scope. So this is a closure which is going to remember. So count is not there in the scope, but it is remembering a variable from its outer scope. So this is the outer scope. This is what is called as closure. Now since it is remembering that, okay, there was a variable in my outer function in outer scope, it is going to do plus plus. So 0 plus plus is what? It is 1. So this is what you see, 1 is written here. Then again you're calling this function inner. So again till now count has become 1. Now second time when you call, 1 plus plus becomes 2, right? So that 2 is printed here. So this is what is called as closure. So closure, it is a function that remembers the variable from its outer scope even after the outer function has finished executing. So this is how you can explain closure to your interviewer. Now let's see the 10th question. What is event loop in JavaScript? So event loop, it handles the asynchronous operation by moving the task from callback queue to the call stack when it is empty, and it lets the JavaScript appear concurrent while being single threaded. So we all know that JavaScript is single threaded language, but how does it handle asynchronous code? How does it execute them? So let's see how it works. Normally we have something called as call stack here. First we have something called as call stack. So you have multiple line of synchronous code, right? So call stack is going to execute all this code one by one. So first it is going to execute all the code which is written in asynchronous code. So one by one all the code of lines will get executed, will come and get settled in call stack, and one by one all these things get executed. So call stack, it follows leaf order, that is last in first out. So the last code which was put in, that will be executed first. So this is how call stack works. Then we have something called as callback queue. In callback queue also we have two parts. So previously we had only one, but afterwards, after the introduction of the promises, we have two. So we have something called as micro task queue, and we have macro task queue. This is our micro task queue, and the second one is macro task queue. So micro task queue, it holds the callback functions of promises like promise dot then dot catch and finally. So these things, so promises are handled in micro task queue, and our synchronous code like set timeout, set interval, input output operations, they are handled in the macro task queue. So all the callback functions of set timeout and set interval are present in macro task queue. So there is something called as event loop here. Okay, this is our event loop where it is present. So event loop is constantly checking the call stack. If call stack is empty, let us suppose that all synchronous code got executed and now call stack is empty, then event loop is going to check the callback queue, is there any priority item or synchronous priority item that has to be executed. Then event loop will see that yes, there are some priority callback functions to be done, so it is going to give the first priority to micro task queue and then to the macro task queue. Okay, so always remember that promises, they have more priority when compared to set timeout or set interval. Even if the interval you have given is 0 second, it doesn't matter, but still promises are going to have higher priority. So micro task queue, they have higher priority, whereas macro task queue, they have lesser priority. Okay, so event loop will check that yes, there is some function to be executed, so it is going to take that callback function of promise and it will put it in the call stack and it will execute it. Then again it will check, is there anything pending in micro task queue. So once all the micro task queue functions are executed, then only it will check the macro task queue. Unless there is something pending in micro task queue, macro task will be waiting. So once it is empty, yes, all these functions are done, then event loop will check with macro task queue, do you have something which you want to execute. So yes, there are some functions, so it will take these functions also and it will put it in the call stack, and that is how your asynchronous codes get executed. So this is called as event loop, how it handles the asynchronous operation. So event loop, it handles the asynchronous operation. So all the promises, set timeout, set interval, they are asynchronous operations, right? So it is helpful for handling the asynchronous operation by moving the task from the callback queue to the call stack when it is empty. So when call stack is empty, then event loop will get you the callback functions of promises and the set interval and set timeout. So this is how event loop is useful for making your JavaScript appear more concurrent even if the JavaScript is single threaded language. Now let's see the 11th question. So for 11th question, interviewer had given the array to the candidate, and then he had asked that this is the array which you got, and in this array you are supposed to return only the unique value. So here you can see 2 is repeated and then 4 is also repeated, right? So you have to return the unique value from this array. So candidate made use of the new set. You can make use of any other approach. So in this video we are discussing with the set approach. There are multiple ways of finding the unique values and giving. So if you have any other approach, it's good, but this is one of the simplest example how you can use. So he made use of a function that is unique, and then in which you are passing a array. So that array is what you are expecting in the argument, and then after that you are returning a array, and you are making use of new set. So set is useful for giving you the unique values. So he made use of the set, and then in that set he passed the array, and then this set returned the unique values, and that is what was spread here. So you made use so the candidate made use of the spread operator, and from here you got the 1 2 3. So that is what is returned. So in array you got the unique values. So interviewer agreed for this approach. In case you have any other approach, you can make use of that method also to solve this question. This was the simplest way which candidate used in the interview, and interviewer also agreed for this solution. So this is how you can give the unique values from your new array. You have to make use of the set. Now let's see the 12th question, that is what is the difference between bind, call and apply. So bind, call and apply, they are useful for borrowing the function from the kind of object you want to execute. So it is helpful for changing the context or borrowing the function and changing the context of your object. So let's see, call, it is useful for calling the function with given this an argument. So you are going to give this, that is your context of your object and the arguments. Then coming to apply, it is same as call, but it accepts the argument in the array format. And bind, it returns a new function with bound this. Now so let's see a example and then we will understand how bind, call, apply works. So we have one function greet, and then you are expecting something called as greeting, and then you are returning console.log greeting. So whatever is the argument, hello, hi, bye, whatever, that greeting will pass. And then whatever is the context, that is your object, whatever is the context of your object, so this dot name. So in that object you would have the name. So that name you are basically printing here like hello Shruti or something like that. So this is our object which we will be making use to understand the bind, call and apply. So this is our object, that is const user, and it is having a variable called name, that is Shruti. Now let's see how we can borrow this function. So first we have to make use of the function name, that is greet. Then we have to write call, that we want to make use of call, okay, call function. And then in this first argument what we have to pass is we have to pass our object, that is the context from where we want to call the function. So you are passing user. What is user? It is an object. An object is having something called as name as its property. Then you have to pass the argument. What argument you have to pass? You have to pass the argument which you are expecting in the greet function. What are you expecting in greet function? You are expecting greeting, right? So that argument you will pass in the second argument. So this is the syntax of your call, apply and bind. So for call you are first passing your object, then you are passing the argument. So once you call, then you will get the console. You will get console as hello Shruti. So greeting is what you have passed, so hello is what is received, so you will print hello. And this dot name, what is this dot name? It is pointing to user. So what is user dot name? User dot name is Shruti, so you will get answer as hello Shruti. Then let's see apply. Apply is also similar to the call, but in the apply we expect the argument in the array format. So here you just pass these strings, right? Here you have to pass the same string in array format. So same syntax, you have to call the function, you have to make use of function name, then you have to write apply. And first what you will pass? You will pass your object, and after this you are going to give the argument in array format, and then this is what is taken in the greet function. So what is the greeting you passed? You passed hi. Then what is the this dot name? What is your context? Context is user. What is user dot name? It is Shruti. So you will get console, your value will be hi Shruti. Now let's see how we can use bind. So for bind also we have to write the same thing, that is greet dot bind. We made use of greet dot call, greet dot apply. Similarly greet dot bind. Then first argument you will pass is your object, then you will pass the argument, that is your greeting. But this is not going to give any console, it is not going to log anything in your console. Instead it is going to return you a new function. So this is what is written above. It returns a new function with bound this. So you have got a bound this function, new function. Now if you want to console anything, you have to call this function, and then something will be printed in your console. So you are calling this function. You can see how do we call function? We make use of parenthesis. So bound, since it is a function, we have to call that function. And then the greeting which we sent was hey, and then Shruti is there, whatever is our object, that is user name, user dot name, that is Shruti. So hey Shruti is printed. So these are the difference between bind, call and apply. So you can say the definition, and in case interviewer asks you to show a code example, then you can show this code example. Now let's see the next question. Write a simple promise that resolves after 1 second. So interviewer had asked the candidate to share the screen, and then they had to write a simple promise that resolves after 1 second. So let's see how we can write the promise. So for writing a promise, we have to make use of new keyword, and then we have to write promise keyword here. After that, normally promise they expect to augment, that is when it will be resolved and rejected, but it is optional. So here you can see we are just passing resolve, but in case they ask you for reject also, then you can write like resolve comma reject. So this is optional. Normally argument here what we have given is only one, that is resolve. So what we are writing set timeout, that after 1 second you have to resolve it. So we have to make use of this resolve keyword, and then we are writing that after 1000, after 1000 millisecond, that is after 1 second, we are going to resolve this promise, and we will be resolving it with the string done, and that is what will be stored here. So like this is the promise which you will be getting, but afterwards you will get this done as a string. So how are we handling this promise? To handle this promise, we have to write wait dot then, and then we are just doing console dot log of whatever we have got. So this is how we can write a simple promise that resolves after 1 second. So they might not ask you to write the entire working code, but at least this syntax they might ask you. They might want to check that if you know at least the syntax of how we have to write the promise. So you have to make use of new keyword, then promise, and then there will be argument which is optional. So there are two arguments. You can pass also one because since they have asked you just for resolving, so you can make use of only one argument. Then you are just writing set timeout, that after 1 second resolve it with this string done, and then you are handling your promise by writing dot then function, and then you're consoling whatever is the value. Now let's see the 14th question. 14th question which was asked was, what is the difference between shallow and the deep copy in JavaScript? So let's see what is different. So shallow copy, it copies only the top level properties, whereas deep copy, it recursively copies all the properties. And in this interview, in this question, they had given a code snippet, and they had asked that what will be the output of the code. So we will see this is the similar code what was given to that candidate to guess the output. So this is the similar code, we will be looking into it in soon. But difference wise, you can say that shallow copy, it is going to copy only the top level properties, whereas deep copy, it is going to copy all the properties recursively. So code example, code snippet which was given is, we are having a object and which had few properties, which is having few properties like name Shruti, and then there is skill, and this is array. So we all know that array, it is a non-primitive data type, right? So this is how, this is how the object was present, that is original object, then there was one string property, then there was one array property. Now what is the code written is, we have taken the original and we have copied it in another variable called shallow copy. So we are trying to do a shallow copy of our original object, and then in the shallow copy, whatever we have, so new copy was created of our original copyright in that object. For that object skills, in that skills, what is skills? Skills is a non-primitive data type, so always it is referenced by their they are always pointed by their reference, right? So not by value but by reference. So for those skills, so shallow copy dot skills dot push, we are pushing one more string in this array. So one more string is pushed in this array. Now the question was console.log of original dot skills. So will this skills of the original will also get changed, or only in new copy will we will be having node.js? So answer is yes. In original skills also, the arrays will get changed, because this is how the shallow copy works. So this is a example of shallow copy. So shallow copy only copies the top level properties. So what are top level properties? Your primitive data types are your top level properties like strings and all, but these arrays, they are always pointed by the reference. So these arrays remain same. So this shallow copy array and the original copy array, skills array, they are basically pointing to the same position, same reference position. So that is why this is called as shallow copy. So only top level properties were copied, and if you're trying to change anything from the shallow copy also, your original copy will get affected. So this is the code snippet which was shared, and it was expected that you will give a correct answer here. Now let's see the next question. Next question which was asked was, create a React component that fetches data using use effect. So let's see how we can make it. So this is our component function user, and then here we are going to display that whatever response we get from the API, but we have to call the API by using the use effect. So for writing use effect, what is the syntax? You have to write use effect keyword, and then there is a first argument, that is your callback function, and the second argument is your dependency array. So in dependency array, we have passed a empty array, which means that it will run only the first time when your component is rendered. So this is the first time when you're calling API, only first time you will be calling API, and you are making use of fetch web API to call the API. This is the API URL which will be given to you in the interview. So you have to call that API and you have to store it somewhere. So you are handling your promise by dot, then converting it to rest.json, then again you're handling whatever is the exact response. So this is where you will get the data, and then you are storing it in a state called user. So we have defined a variable, that is use state variable with user, and you're setting the data whatever you received, you are setting it in something called as user, and then you have to show it. So in return you're writing ul, that is unordered list, and one by one you are going to show all the users name. So you are basically mapping through all the users array. See, you can see that it is the array, right? You are mapping through everything. So it is array of objects, so you're mapping through all of the objects of the array, and then you are listing down it in the list format. You have to give key whenever making use of the map, else you will get warning, and then you are just displaying u dot name, that is individual user's name is what you're displaying. So this is how you can fetch the data using use effect. So this is a important part which you should always remember, that how you have to call the APIs by making use of use effect hook. Now let's see the next question. What are controlled component in React? So controlled components value is always managed by React state. So any component whose form data or the values are being managed by React state, or that is use state, then that component becomes controlled component. But whereas if you're making use of ref to directly access the DOM element, then your component becomes uncontrolled. But since this question was about control, so you can say that control components values or form input values, they are always managed by React state. code example, you can say normal, that we have one component, and then if you're making use of use state to manage any value, so here we have input value, right? So what is the value which is present? It is a use state variable. And how is this value managed? It is managed by the state, react state, that is use state, which is use state hook, which is given in react to us. So if you're making use of the use state hook to manage the values of your form component, then your component becomes controlled component. Here it is normal that on change, your whatever is the event, you are just setting that event in this value by making use of set value, and you're assigning the value like e dot target dot value. So this is the normal example. So most of the components which we use are mostly controlled component, but in case we're making use of use ref hook to directly access the DOM element, then your component becomes uncontrolled. But normally it's controlled only. If you're not making use of use ref, you're making use of react state, then your component is controlled component. Let's see the next question, which is what is Redux, and explain the state management architecture. So Redux, you can say that in Redux we have different uh, pro- uh, so let's see the next question. So let's see the next question, that is what is Redux. So Redux, it is a third party library which is useful for storing the values. So let's see the next question, that is what is Redux, and explain the state management architecture. So Redux, it is a JavaScript library for managing large application. So if you have a large application, then for managing your application's state predictably and consistently, we make use of the Redux. So it centralizes the state in a single store, that is this, that is central state container. It is going to centralize the state in the single store, which is updated only by dispatching the actions that are processed by the pure function, that are reducers. Let's see how it happens. Normally we have some UI components. So whenever you click on those component, let us suppose you have something like add to do list. So if you're clicking on this, you are going to dispatch the action. So you are going to dispatch the action that you are doing add to do. You want to add or you want to delete. So there might be different uh, ways of how we can dispatch the action. Like why do we want to dispatch the action? So there might be different reasons why we are doing the dispatch of the action. So you are going to do add, you are going to remove, or something like that. So you have dispatched the action. Now this action is going to get checked in the reducer. So reducers, they are the pure functions, and which are going to update this state based upon the action. So whatever is the state, for example, if you have file list in the 2D item, then it is going to check whether you have clicked on add. In case you have clicked on add, it is going to update this state. If you clicked on remove, it is going to remove some list from those entire list. So this is how reducers work. And then once the reducer has updated this state, then the store entire data is stored in the central state container, that is store. And then all the component which are accessing this value, they are going to re-render. So UI is going to re-render. This is how the Redux works. So to dispatch the action, we make use of use dispatch hook. And to subscribe to the store, so multiple components, they can subscribe to the store and get the value, they can show the latest value. So they make use of use selector hook. Two hooks useful for Redux are use dispatch and use selector. So let's see one by one what we have written. Action, it is a plain object with the type and the optional payload. Yes, so action, they are object and they will have the type. So type can be add, remove, or do it later. So such things might be there. Then we have optional payload, that what do you want to add. Then we have reducer, they are pure function to update the state based upon the action. They also decide that what will be the structure, how we will be storing, and what is the logic. Then we have store, that is the central state container. So how it works is UI dispatches the action, then reducer updates the state, and store holds the state, and UI re-renders. So whoever has subscribed, whatever components have subscribed to this store, they are going to re-render. Yeah, now we have covered all of the important questions which were asked in this interview, that is Capgemini interview. So if you found this video to be helpful, then do give a like and subscribe to the channel. Also, if you have any suggestion or any feedback, or you want me to make video on any other topic, then you can let me know in the comment section. Thanks for watching everyone.